Okay, so I'm gonna try something different. Hopefully my face is not in there right now. Anyways, so I'm going to tell a story. Probably not going to speak too loud, so if you can hear me, great. If not, I'm sorry. So, Greek mythology, or just, there's a lot of other mythology, not just Greek mythology, that talk about, you know, gods or demigods or mermaids and stuff like that. And so this is something that caught my attention. Now, I like to paint stuff like this. And I have been thinking a lot about the whole mermaid thing and, the story. Not the one that we know from Disney, not the one with Ariel and So Sweet and everything like that. This one's a little bit more sad. Okay, so let's say there was a bunch of gods, goddesses, and stuff like that, okay? And let's say that they, got into trouble, and so they were cast down as like mermaids or mermen, and they were cast down almost to teach them like a lesson, right? So they were doing their thing, they started integrating themselves, and they started being really, whatever with the whole mermaid thing. And one day, there's still men on the land, and there's a mermaid, and she happens to, I wouldn't say get beached, but she just, was in the area, and there was a bunch of men, and unfortunately, sometimes certain individuals are not able to help themselves. So, because they have certain urges or something like that, there was obviously the mermaid's outnumbered, right? She can't do anything. And they click off right now if you are not into this stuff, or you're squeamish or anything like that. So they, proceed to hold her down, and they take the sword and, cut the fin, thinking that they're able to, unfortunately, have their way. And it sounds very morbid, but so this happens, and the whole idea of sewing and mending and stitching and stuff like that, so after this horrible thing happened, the mermaid was stitched up, but no longer would she be a mermaid. Now she has two legs, and now she is, she's been brought onto shore. So they captured her, they kept her, and because the mermaids were so angered and so mad about what happened, they were outraged. So between the mermaids and the creatures of the sea at that time, there was this huge battle, and any ships, any men that sailed, any pirates, any, you name it, that were on the seas, the mermaids became sirens, like a call for like a warning, and the sirens used to compel these ships into rocks and all treacheries and just to sink the ship. And they would have the creatures of the sea turn against these ships. And there's stories, so many stories of ships being pulled under or shipwrecked, or horrible stories of mermaids and stuff like that. You know, gaining the trust of men, and then like a femme fatale almost, and then just kind of get the revenge for this happening. And the gods, so to speak, the ones that cast down these fallen, I would say fallen angels of the sea, gods were pissed. So they decided to make all the mermaids, almost all of them, just, become land bound. They were almost outcasts. They were removed of their fins, and they were forced to walk among the land with the rest of the men because of the horrible things they did. Because something so terrible happened like that, their reaction to it, although just in my opinion, it wasn't necessarily right. It didn't really balance anything out. So suffice to say, all these mermaids, on land, they started mixing DNA with the humans, so to speak, and other worldly creatures, or like, let's say, the elves, or let's say, stuff like that. And so the DNA was mixed, and there began an explanation of this to try to tell the story, but the story never quite got through. The story never quite made it, and so they tried for so long. The dances they came up with to explain it, the Highland dancing, for instance, that was supposed to be a display of victory, and men would, well, this is long afterwards, but men would use this dance to display victory. Two swords crossed on the ground. They call it Highland dancing, and in that Highland dancing, actually, if you break it apart, it almost looks like the sequence code of DNA, if you look really closely. Now, this is just a story, but if you ask me, all those mermaids, all those poor souls, or rich souls, if you ask me, those women and men with voices of their own, they had to find their voice again. They had to earn the trust again, and they had to do everything possible they can to get back in the good graces of the gods. And the octopus never forgot, and it never will. And the strong arms of the octopus, some of them are what brought some ships down. The tails of those ships being brought under by giant squid or giant octopus. And their strong arms will pull them under. Well, although they may have been a part of it, they had their own punishment for partaking in the undertaking, so to speak. And so this dance that continued, the Highland dance, was actually originally symbolic of the DNA that was mixed. And it was a telling of the story. It was a telling of the splittings. It was a telling of what happened and the knowledge that was passed down to seamstresses that sew or knit or anything like that, and the voices that today's artists have, so beautiful, almost like a siren, a call, an alarm. They continue to live amongst men and forever are trying so hard to get back in the good graces and to be acknowledged, because the further they go, the only way they could go any deeper would be below the ocean. Now, this may just be a story, but it's definitely a thought. And I'm not saying it's true, but it's definitely an interesting idea. To have in the back of your head of maybe the real reason we don't see any mermaids anymore, or what really happened between the earth, the land, and the sky. If you like the story, great. If not, that's okay. It's just a story. Not the most pleasant story, albeit, but it's a story nonetheless. I thought I would do something a little bit different this time. On a more pleasant note, all those singers, those people that had regained their voice, almost like Ariel. It's fascinating if that were to be true. Horrifying if that's really what happened to poor mermaids. But I know when they depicted them in some movies and stuff, they were like evil sirens that called in the death of sailors, and the whole idea of ships being taken down and giant squid, giant octopus. Actually, they do have, like, below the surface, they've got a lot of creatures that haven't even been discovered yet. And they can keep going. They will just keep finding more stuff as they go. I thought this was a really nice story, minus the vulgar parts, but such is reality. Some things are hard to hear, and that's okay. Be interesting if they made that into a real life movie. And yeah, Highland dancing. If you ever look when they place their feet, ankle to ankle, heel to heel, like two fins together. And there's a lot of other symbology and stuff and things that tie together when it comes to mermaids, or the tales. The tales. When it comes to the fables. That, and another thing I found very interesting too, fairies. Always been fascinated by fairies. And I noticed a lot of people with the names, certain names, if you break them down, certain names are actually, of trees, woodland, and stuff like that, like the origins of the last name. And it just reminds me, I'm like, what if those people with the last name of like Oaks or Birch or something like that actually derived from, let's say they were woodland folk or something like that. You can make a story out of that instead. That'd be so neat. Anyways, like I said, this is just a story. Not the nicest story. But just some food for thought. And you can take it or leave it. I hope you're having a good New Year so far.